Author's preface to the revised edition. Living in the Light was first published in 1986. Since that time, it has sold over 1 million copies and has been translated into many languages all over the world. Today, it continues to sell steadily, and I receive continuous feedback that it is touching people's lives in a meaningful way. Not long ago, I revised and updated my first book, Creative Visualization, and ever since that time, I've been feeling that I'd like to do the same for Living in the Light. The basic message of the book seems to be as timely and relevant as ever. Over the years since I wrote it, however, my understanding has developed and hopefully deepened through my own life experience and my work. I felt that there were many things I would say somewhat differently now, and that perhaps it would be valuable to my readers to hear more of my ongoing story as well as some of my older and wiser perspective. Having updated these two books, I now realize that revising a classic book is a delicate and difficult art form quite different from writing one. The challenge is this: how do I bring it up to date and into alignment with my present understanding while respecting and honoring the integrity and power of the original work, which in a sense is a living entity unto itself. When I sat down to revise Living in the Light, I hadn't read it for a number of years. As I went through it, I had two distinct reactions. One response was, wow, this is really good. I forgot that I was saying this stuff so clearly way back then. The other response was an embarrassed wince when I felt I had said something a little too simplistic or grandiose, or found something I no longer agreed with. I have not made major changes to the book. I have extended and updated my story in the introduction and reorganized a little, adding a chapter and taking out to others that no longer fit well. Otherwise, I have simply reworked it a bit, adding, subtracting, and editing to bring it more into alignment with my current views. I have only modified it where I strongly felt it could be improved or made more accurate. At times, I had to fight the temptation to simply write a whole new book on the same subject. I comforted myself with the thought that readers interested in a more complete view of how my author's preface ideas have evolved can easily find it in one of my newer works, such as The Path of Transformation or Creating True Prosperity. Those of you who have read Living in the Light in the original version may notice a slightly different tone to the revised edition. At the time I wrote the book, I was filled with youthful enthusiasm for the power I was finding in these ideas and practices. A dozen years later, I'm as enthusiastic and committed to these ideas as ever, but I now have a healthy respect for the ongoing challenge of integrating them into our daily lives. So you may notice a somewhat humbler approach, acknowledging and honoring the complexities of life and the human journey. Probably the greatest difference for me between then and now is my understanding of the necessity and importance of acknowledging, working with, and embracing our disowned energies, our shadow side. At this point, the phrase living in the light has a deeper and subtler meaning for me than before. It refers to the consciousness and balance that comes into our lives as we become aware of, accept, and express the many aspects of who we are, including the parts that we may have feared and rejected. When I wrote this book, the millennium change was still years away. Now it is at hand, and the idea that we are creating a new world seems more relevant than ever. Whether you have read Living in the Light before and are curious to read the revised version, or are a first-time reader, welcome. I hope you enjoy the book and find inspiration on your journey of self-discovery. Introduction: the beginning of my journey. I have always had a burning desire to understand how the universe works, what life is all about, and the meaning and purpose for which I am here. In retrospect, I can see that my entire life has been devoted to my search for truth and understanding. I was brought up in a very intellectual, well-educated, non-religious family. My parents were essentially atheists, and very early on I remember having the attitude that a belief in God was a human fabrication, a fantasy, a superstition created to help people feel better about the totally unexplained and unexplainable predicament we seem to find ourselves in. Human existence, or any other kind of existence, was simply an accident of nature and had no particularly fathomable meaning. I preferred to admit that I didn't know how we got here or why, rather than to adopt a simplistic explanation merely to gain a sense of security. Truth was rational, and anything that couldn't be proved scientifically didn't exist. I also felt somewhat condescending toward people who were weak enough to have to make up a god to believe in. The positive side of this upbringing was that I didn't get a lot of the rigid dogma and deeply negative messages about right and wrong, heaven and hell, and sin that so many people receive in their early religious training. On the other hand, I had no conscious concept or experience of the spiritual dimension of life, and no answers. For the questions I had about the meaning and purpose of my life, my parents really wanted a child and were very loving to me. Unfortunately, they were unable to work out their own relationship and were divorced when I was 2 years old. Although I don't remember it clearly, I know this event had a major impact on my life and affected my later patterns in relationship. After the divorce, I lived with my mother who never remarried or had any other children. My father did remarry, and I often visited my father and his other family. My mother developed a successful career as a city planner in the days when there were few women in that field. She dealt with the usual challenges of single parenting or trying to balance the needs of her child with the demands of her work. Being the only child of a working mother, I developed a strong sense of responsibility and self-sufficiency quite early. My mother is a very adventurous person. She loves to try new things, and for me, she was a great role model of fearlessness and pioneer spirit. She had been one of the first educated American women in her generation to have natural childbirth. I was the first baby her doctor had ever delivered without an anesthetic. I was blessed with a very fortunate birth. On September 30, 1948, at 9 to 10 p.m. in Trenton, New Jersey. For all you astrologers, my mother loves to explore new places and we traveled a lot. When I was a child, all over the United States, to the West Indies, Mexico, Hawaii, Europe. We also moved frequently whenever my mother changed jobs. Until I was about 15, I had never lived in one place longer than 2 or 3 years. My mother's family had been Quakers and we still used the plain language when speaking to my grandmother, a saying, rather than you, for the Quakers is an acknowledgement of the God within each person. So, on a deep level, I absorbed the profound respect for spirit and concern for humanity that is woven into the fabric of the Quaker religion, which I feel had a strong influence on me later in my life. When I was 14 years old, I went through an enormous emotional crisis, triggered initially by the collapse of my first romance with an older man of 19 I was sure no one would ever compare. It snowballed into a deep and long-lasting existential despair. I took a long, hard look at life and recognized that there was really no point or meaning to it. I could see that all the things that were supposed to provide significance in life, education, success, relationships, money, were in themselves ephemeral, meaningless, and empty. There didn't seem to be anything else to fill the void. I was deeply disillusioned and depressed, and basically remained in that state for several years. In retrospect, I can see that I was going through an experience that all of us must pass through at one time or another, or many times, of what mystics call the piercing of the veil of illusion, the point where we begin to recognize that our physical world is not the ultimate reality and we turn inward to discover the spiritual aspect of our existence. At these times, we usually feel, emotionally, that we are hitting bottom, but as we actually hit bottom, it's as if we fall through a trapdoor into a new place for the inner realm of the soul, where we can begin to explore our connection to life in a whole new way. When we can face our fears and move through such a dark night of the soul, we are greeted by the dawn of a profound new adventure, new experiences. Over the next few years, I began to have new experiences, openings, a growing awareness that did not fit into my former rational framework. In college, I studied psychology and got involved in some encounter groups and sensitivity training groups that, in addition to allowing me to release old emotional pain, led me to new feelings of love, joy, and oneness with all. I studied dance and discovered that when I was dancing, I would often have an exhilarating feeling, as if some higher force had taken over and was moving me in an abandoned and thrilling way. I had always been interested in Eastern philosophy, so I read books about Buddhism and Hinduism. I practiced yoga and meditation and found that they helped me feel more centered, relaxed, and in tune with myself. After graduating from college, I spent 2 years traveling around the world, living for several months in India, where I gained a deep awareness of the Eastern mystical tradition. My travels were a powerful experience for me because, with little money and no real plans, I lived by following my intuition. I had set off originally for a vacation in Italy and ended up making a 2-year journey around the world. I learned that I could live happily with virtually no possessions and move safely into known places. This was one of my earliest experiences of the synergistic things that happen when we trust our inner guidance and follow the flow of our energy. Getting conscious. When I returned to the United States, I was hooked on something called consciousness. I couldn't have defined what it was, but I knew that I wanted more of it, and that for me, nothing else mattered as much as my process of personal growth. I felt that if I pursued external goals such as career, money, or relationships, they would ultimately feel empty. Whereas if I devoted myself to my own development, I would ultimately have the things that my heart desired, such as loving relationships, meaningful work, and a sense of abundance, and that it would all come about in a more satisfying way. I was motivated not only by my yearning to find greater fulfillment in my own life, but by a strong desire to make a contribution toward positive change in the world and in other people's healing and happiness. I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, which I recognized as the forefront of the so-called human potential movement, and plunged into the earnest pursuit of knowledge, wisdom, healing, and transformation. I took classes and workshops, avidly read new books, meditated, and talked constantly to others involved in the same process. After reading Handbook to Higher Consciousness by Ken Keyes, I went to live at his center in Berkeley, where we worked on our growth intensely, day and night, for a year. After that, I continued to live communally for several years with others who were involved in an intensive personal development process. During this time, I did whatever I could to make enough money to live on a housework, office work, odds and ends, while I focused on my real work. Since that time, over 25 years ago, my life has been dedicated to my growth and evolution as a conscious being. I gradually came to understand that becoming more conscious meant becoming more aware of all that was taking place within me and around me, how my inner world affected my outer world and vice versa. I realized that the more awareness I have, the more choice I have in how I create or respond to the circumstances of my life. When we are relatively unconscious, we simply do what we've always done, not realizing there is any other way. As we gradually become more aware, we begin to recognize that other options exist, and we can make other choices in how we live. At first, I imagined that this process involved a straight line from A to B, A being the darkness of ignorance, and B being full enlightenment. The goal was to move from A to B as directly as possible. If we were dedicated and fortunate enough to achieve enlightenment, we would have completed the process, so we would be radiant beings, always filled with light, love, and wisdom. Eventually, I understood that consciousness is an ever unfolding, deepening, and expanding process with no end point. We are infinite and complex beings, and our human journey involves not just a spiritual awakening, but the development of all levels of our being: the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical, and the integration of all these aspects into a healthy and balanced daily life. I'm getting ahead of myself, however. So back to my story. My name. People often ask me about my name, so I thought I'd pause here and tell you about it. While in India, I became very fascinated with the Hindu religion and began to study it. I had not been raised as a Christian, and that religion had never held much interest for me. I liked some of the ideas in Buddhism a lot, but it seemed a bit intellectual to me. The myths, symbols, and deities in the Hindu religion touched me in a deeper place in my soul. It is a very complex religion, and I don't even pretend to understand it, but I grasped a few things. In the Hindu religion, there is a trinity of three main deities that symbolize three aspects of life: is the preserver, and Shiva is the destroyer. Shiva represents the constant changing of the universe, the fact that everything must constantly be destroyed in order to be reborn. He reminds us that we must constantly let go of everything we hold on to in order to flow with the motion of life. Many of his fervent devotees give up home and possessions and wander freely, abandoning themselves to following and trusting the energy of the universe. Shiva is also known as Natareva, the Lord of the Dance, literally, the Lord of Rhythm. They say that it is his dance that keeps the universe in motion. He is depicted as a very beautiful and powerful man with long flowing hair. It is said that out of his hair flows the holy Ganges River. I felt irresistibly drawn to him. Shakti is the feminine aspect of Shiva. The word Shakti means energy, or the energy that everything in the universe is made of. It is the energy of life, or the life force running through our bodies. It also means female energy. In the Hindu practice of Tantra, there are techniques for enlightenment through channeling one's sexual energy. In this practice, the man is referred to as Shiva and the woman is Shakti. When I returned from India, I met and for several years lived with my friend Mark Allen. He didn't think my previous name fit me, and knowing of my love affair with Shiva, he began calling me Shakti. I liked it and began using it. At the time, I don't think I realized how powerful the name was, but I certainly realize it now. I feel that the vibration of the name has helped me to emerge into my power. Gawain is the last name I was born with. It is the same name as Sir Gawain in the King Arthur legends. According to one dictionary definition, It means battle hawk, which I think is a wonderful image. To me, Shakti represents my feminine aspect, and Gawain, my masculine aspect. Pre-TV visualization. One of the earliest workshops I took was the Silva Mind Control course. At that time, I was still rather skeptical about this sort of thing and probably would never have gone to it except that my mother had taken the course and highly recommended it to me. I will never forget her description of a technique in which you can imagine what you want to have happen and it will very often come about. Mine felt doubtful about this, but my heart made a leap, and I remember thinking, ever since I was a child, I always knew that there was magic, that somehow, somewhere, magic really exists. This sounds like the closest thing to it that I have ever heard of. I took the course and I was amazed that we started slowly and easily with simple techniques that anyone could accept and do, and gradually we worked our way to more unexplainable but very powerful processes. After 5 days, I had a strong psychic experience in which, for a period of several hours, I was able to consistently pick up specific information that I had no way of knowing except through my intuition. That experience began to dissolve some of my former limits on what I thought was possible. The most important technique I learned in that course was the basic technique of creative visualization, or relaxing deeply and then picturing a desired goal in your mind exactly the way you want it to be. I started to practice this technique and found that it was amazingly effective. Quite often the things I pictured came true quickly and in unexpected ways. I became fascinated with the possibilities and took some other classes and workshops on similar subjects. Began to use creative visualization techniques in my life regularly and to teach them to my friends. I read The Nature of Personal Reality by Jen Roberts and was powerfully affected by the idea that we all create our own reality. Soon, I began to lead workshops and do private counseling, and eventually wrote creative visualization. When I got the idea to write the book, I just wanted to gather all the ideas and techniques I had learned from various sources and put them down on paper in a comprehensive way. I thought I would write a little booklet I could give to friends and perhaps sell to my clients and a few interested people. As I wrote it, I was filled with self-doubt of who am I to be writing a book like this? I'm no expert. Some force inside of me kept pushing me to do it, however, so I did. I used creative visualization techniques to help create the book. I got an artist friend to design the cover. Then I hung the cover up on my wall and kept imagining and affirming that the book was already finished. I found writing it was fairly effortless, except for my nagging doubts, and before I knew it, it had turned into a real book that some friends and I published together. What I didn't fully realize at the time was that the book was coming from a higher creative source within me. On a personality level, I had doubts and fears, but because of my inner commitment to myself, I was willing to go ahead and follow the creative energy anyhow, because I had a natural ability to think and write clearly, was really interested in these ideas, had a good background in the subject, and was willing to take some risks. The universe could use me as a creative channel. The publishing process was similar. My friends Mark Allen and John Burnoff and I knew very little about business or publishing, and had no money at all, but we had a desire to write and publish our own books. By trusting our feelings and being willing to risk acting on them, we found that we were led step by step in what we needed to do. We made many mistakes in the process, mostly when we didn't follow our inner guidance, and some of them were painful and extremely expensive, but eventually, we created a successful publishing company, originally named Whatever Publishing, Inc., now called New World Library. Creative visualization has been successful far beyond any wild fantasy I might have had at the time I wrote it, although it was never marketed or publicized in any significant way, other than through word of mouth. At the time of this writing, it has sold nearly 3 million copies and has been translated into over 25 foreign languages. 20 years after its original publication, in 1978, the revised edition is still selling steadily. I have received countless letters and calls from people all over the world saying it has helped them transform their lives. Of course, this has been quite gratifying to me, especially because I can see that it is the higher power of the universe at work. I have felt like a proud mother, watching my child out there in the world, doing its work and making its fortune, knowing that it is mine and yet not mine. It came through me and I helped to form it, and yet it is a being, an entity of its own, with its own destiny and its own connection to the creative source. Listening to inner guidance. When I first discovered the techniques of creative visualization and found that they worked, I was excited because I felt that through using them I could create whatever I wanted in my life. Was elated by the feeling that I could have everything I desired. This was an important step for me as it took me out of the essentially powerless attitude that I had had previously, of the attitude that life is something that happens to you and that all you can do is make the best of it. It was in some ways a victim position, giving power to people and things outside of myself. Using creative visualization, I began to realize that the power rested in me, that I could choose to create my life the way I wanted it to be. It was very empowering and very freeing. As I explored the process of creating my own reality, I gradually began to realize that the creative power I was feeling was coming from a source other than just my personality. For one thing, some of the things I thought I wanted didn't manifest on. In retrospect, I could see that it was for my highest good that they didn't happen. Other things occurred so miraculously that it was as if some unseen force was putting everything in place. Sometimes I would have flashes of insight and awareness, or future visions, that were highly accurate and seemed to come from a source deep within myself. I became more and more interested in discovering what this creative force was all about and how it worked. I began to realize that my soul, or higher self, seemed to know more than my personality self did about a lot of things. I saw that it would probably be smart to try to find out what that inner guidance was telling me and follow it. Every time I did that, it seemed to work. Eventually, I lost interest in trying to control my life, to make things happen in a way that I thought I wanted them to happen. Began to practice surrendering to the higher power of the universe within me and finding out what it wanted me to do. I discovered that in the long run, it really wasn't that different. The universe always seems to want me to have everything I truly want, and it seems to know how to guide me in creating it more effectively than I would know how to create it myself. The emphasis is different, though. Instead of figuring out what I wanted, setting goals, and trying to control what happened to me, I began to practice tuning in receptively to my intuition and acting on what it told me without always understanding why I was doing what I was doing. It was a feeling of letting go of control, surrendering, and allowing the higher power to be in charge. About this time, I met a woman named Shirley Luffman who became a very important teacher to me. She led a group each week, and I began to go to it faithfully and continued to do so for 5 years. She taught me a great deal about how to trust and follow my own intuitive sense. Many of the ideas in Living in the Light, including the concept of male and female and the way I use it, were inspired by Shirley, and I am deeply grateful for what she taught me. Trusting myself. After several years with Shirley, I had to confront the fact that there were things that were happening in the group that didn't feel right to me, and that I couldn't find a way to give my input that was received. I found myself confronting the age-old problem of how to let go of the guru. I respected Shirley so much, and what I had received from her had been so valuable, that it was very difficult to face the time when I knew that I could not look to her for answers anymore. In a sense, Shirley was the metaphysical mother who had given me the support and security I needed until I was ready to trust myself. Eventually, my inner guidance told me I had to stop relying on her. The time had come for me to trust the power of my own inner guidance. It was both terrifying and liberating to realize that I had my own path and there was no one ahead of me who had all the answers. Living in the Light. Once creative visualization became popular, many people began asking me to write another book. About 2 years after creative visualization was published, I began to have strong feelings that I would do so. One day as I was walking in the woods, I was thinking about my new book and I wondered idly what I should call it. Suddenly, my attention was drawn to a patch of woods near the path, where a ray of sunlight was filtering brightly through the trees and shining on the green leaves. It was a beautiful sight, and as I gazed, the words "Living in the Light" came to me. I knew immediately that it was the title of my next book, and I remember the feeling that I hadn't really thought of it myself, but that I had received it. I even had the impression that I didn't have much choice about it. I was being directed to use that name. I felt very inspired, began to make some notes, and told people that I was working on my new book. My publishing company had a cover designed and began to do some preliminary promotion. After a while, I noticed that I hadn't actually written anything. I kept thinking it was going to happen, but it didn't. The truth was, I was not feeling the energy to actually sit down and write, and no amount of thinking that I should do it was making it happen. This time in my life, I was quite committed to the philosophy that life doesn't have to be a struggle. I felt that when it was ready to happen, it would happen naturally. I wasn't willing to do it if it felt like too much of a push. I sensed that the moment would come when the energy would be so strong that I wouldn't be able not to write. Several years went by, and I became involved in many other things. People continued to ask for my new book, and I kept reassuring them that it would be along eventually. Privately, I sometimes had my doubts, and I had to accept the fact that it was possible, that it wouldn't happen. Still, I felt that it would. Writing this book was a little like being pregnant. I could feel something forming and growing inside of me, and I knew that I was creating even though nothing seemed to be happening externally. The baby would emerge when it was fully formed and ready. Finally, 7 years after the publication of Creative Visualization, the time had come to write Living in the Light. At this point in my life, I was extremely busy and had little time to devote to writing. Still, this book would not be stopped. Laurel Kane, a friend who had been working for me for a few years, helped me get my notes and ideas gathered together and down on paper, and contributed her own creative ideas and exercises. I found a few days or a few hours here and there to write. Was spending a lot of time flying all over the world to lead workshops. So much of Living in the Light was written on airplanes. As in writing my first book, I had to deal with fears and doubts that occasionally besieged me. This time, instead of worrying whether I had the right or credibility to share my knowledge, I had the opposite problem. Be wildly successful, I wondered whether my second book would live up to that standard, or would perhaps be a total flop. I now understood one aspect of the difficulties that can accompany fame and the pressure that all successful creative people face to keep producing successful work. In spite of the obstacles, the book seemed to flow from that deep creative source within me. It was published in 1986 by our company, New World Library. By this time, we knew a lot more about publishing, though still, we didn't do a great deal of publicity or marketing. This book, however, seemed to have a life and a destiny of its own. Like Creative Visualization, it sold mainly through word of mouth. Along with Creative Visualization, it has become known as a classic in the field of personal growth. Naturally, I am very pleased by the fact that Living in the Light has reached so many people and encouraged them in their personal growth process. Some of my most precious moments have been when someone approaches me at a workshop and tells me with tears in their eyes that this book has been like a good friend to them, helping them through a particularly dark or challenging time in their life. I feel so grateful that the universe has guided me on a path whereby sharing my own learning process, I have been able to make a contribution to other people's lives. My journey continues. Meanwhile, the success of my second book had made me busier than ever. I was spending most of my time leading workshops. I had found that passing along to others what I was learning was a very important and challenging part of my own growth process. My workshops continued to evolve and change as I did, since I was always teaching what I was learning. I love working with people on deep levels of change, growth, and transformation, and I devoted myself to my work. Eventually, I found that I had become a workaholic, and my work was consuming my life. Much as I loved my career, I began to feel an increasing sense of imbalance in my life. I was great at giving to the world, but had a hard time creating enough space for receiving. So I began to burn out. I longed for more quiet time for myself and my own personal needs. Yet I had a hard time saying no to all the exciting work opportunities that came my way. For quite some time, I had been longing to find the right man to be my partner in life. I had been visualizing him ever since I learned that technique, but somehow he hadn't shown up. I was almost always in a relationship, but they were all deep learning, healing experiences for me, and all were wonderful in certain ways. For one reason or another, however, they weren't quite right for long-term commitment. I couldn't understand why I felt so ready for a committed relationship, and yet it wasn't happening for me. It took me a long time to realize that I wasn't really ready at all. In fact, I had deep conflict and ambivalence about commitment, and a lot of emotional healing to do in the area of relationships. Going back to my parents' divorce, and even before that, to old family patterns, I went through a period where I devoted myself to my emotional healing process, including deep work in therapy. At this time, some wonderful teachers came into my life, a couple named Dr. Hal and Dr. Sidra Stone. They had both been therapists for many years and had developed a body of work called the psychology of selves and a very powerful technique called voice dialogue. From the Stones' teachings, I began to understand more clearly that we all have many different energies or selves within us. Voice dialogue provides an amazing way to get directly in touch with these different selves, become more conscious of them, and bring them into greater balance. Through this work, I discovered many fascinating things about myself and became much more aware of what was going on inside of me. Brought me tremendous healing and growth. The stones have a very developed understanding of the dynamics of human relationship and how our relationships mirror our consciousness. Using their work enabled me to resolve many aspects of my own relationship issues. Hal and Sidra Stone have become good friends, and I consider them my mentors. I highly recommend their books, tapes, and workshops, which are listed in the recommended resources section of this book out, and I have integrated their work into my own writing and workshops. After doing a great deal of deep work, I began to feel a major shift taking place within me. I was more aware than ever of the different parts of myself, and I felt increasingly comfortable with all of them. I was aware of my power and independence, but also of my vulnerability and need. I felt more able to love all aspects of who I am and more able to be with myself in a whole new way. At this point, I had a knowingness that I was ready for a committed partnership where I was still unable to use the word marriage. However, this felt very different than the experience I had had for so long of thinking I was ready. Now I sensed that my partner would be coming along soon. Less than a month later, I connected with Jim Burns, a bright, handsome, and loving man whom I had met a couple of years before but hadn't seen in the interim. Actually, I had met him because of this book he had read, Living in the Light, while living in Minnesota, and came out to California to one of my workshops. To make a long and romantic story short, we fell in love and were married within a year. Being in a committed relationship has been a powerful experience of growth for me. I truly understand now that deep relationship is the clearest mirror we have, and therefore the greatest path to consciousness. This, however, is a topic for another book. I now divide my time between our home and office in California, our beautiful home on the island of Kauai, and traveling to lead workshops around the world. I'm most excited about the in-depth work that takes place in the intensive programs I conduct in Hawaii and California and my 2-year mentoring program. The primary focus of my work now is on becoming conscious of the many different aspects of who we are and learning to develop and express the infinite energies within us. This involves a great deal of what is often called shadow work, becoming aware of the parts of ourselves that we have denied or repressed because we feel they are unacceptable, and learning to value them and make them part of our lives. This healing work brings us into a greater and greater sense of balance and wholeness. I understand, better than ever now, that living in the light involves traveling into the darker places within ourselves and shining the light of our consciousness into them so that we can truly love and express all that we are. On this amazing human journey of ours, the strongest guiding force we have is right within us. We gain access to it through our intuitive sense, our gut feelings about what is right and true for us. The development of our relationship with our inner guidance is what this book is all about. May it serve you well. With love, Shakti Gawain. Part 1. The Principles. Chapter 1. A New Way of Life. We are living in a very exciting and powerful time. On the deepest level of consciousness, a radical transformation is taking place. As the evolution of human consciousness gains greater and greater momentum, we are being challenged on a planetary level to let go of our present way of life and create a new one. In a sense, our old world is dying, and a new world is coming into being. For many of us, the old world was based on an external focus. The having lost our fundamental spiritual connection, we have believed that the material world is the only reality. Thus, feeling essentially lost, empty, and alone, we have continually attempted to find happiness and fulfillment through external things: money, material possessions, relationships, work, fame, food, drugs, and so on. The new world is being built as we open to the higher power of the universe within us and consciously allow that creative energy to move through us. As each of us connects with our inner spiritual awareness, we learn that the creative power of the universe is inside of us. We also learn that we can create our own experience of reality and take responsibility for doing so. The change begins within each individual, but as more and more individuals are transformed, the mass consciousness is increasingly affected. My observation that a profound transformation of consciousness is taking place in our world at this time is based on the changes I see within myself, those around me, and in our society. It is affirmed by feedback I receive from thousands of people I work with all over the world. Living in the light is about this transformation of consciousness within each individual and in the world. My use of the terms old world and new world throughout the book refer to the old way of living that we are relinquishing and the new one that we are creating. For many people, this time may be distressing because the world situation and or our personal lives may seem to be going from bad to worse. It's as if many things are falling apart and will continue to do so with even greater intensity. But on the deepest level, I do not feel this is negative. It is upsetting to us to the degree that we are emotionally attached to our old way of living and steadfastly follow old patterns, rather than trying to open our eyes to the profound changes that are occurring. Paradoxical as it may seem, these changes are the greatest blessing that any of us could possibly imagine. The truth is that the way of life that we have been following for centuries no longer works. While appropriate for its time, it cannot take us where we need and desire to go. The focus on materialism and the external world was necessary in a time when our primary challenge was physical survival. Our patriarchal values and the traditional roles of men and women may have been necessary in order to ensure the protection of our families for a certain period of time in our evolutionary process. At this time, many human beings and other species as well on the earth are still struggling for physical survival. Yet there are an increasing number of us who no longer have to be preoccupied primarily with sheer survival. We have the opportunity, and thus the responsibility, to begin looking for deeper fulfillment on spiritual, mental, and emotional levels. We are searching for greater meaning and purpose in our lives, and for ways to live more responsibly and harmoniously on our planet. While some people throughout history have led relatively meaningful and satisfying lives, I'm afraid that most of us have never found the fulfillment that we have yearned for. Our cultural conditioning has not given us the tools to develop a healthy connection with our inner realms of soul, intuition, and feeling, and to integrate them with our external world. In a way, it's as if we've been in school for our entire lives, receiving an education that teaches the exact opposite of the way the universe actually functions. We try to make things work as we've been taught, and we may even enjoy some degree of success. But for most of us, things never seem to work out as well as we had hoped. That perfect relationship never materializes, or if it does, it soon sours or fades away. Or it may seem as though there is never quite enough money, we never feel truly secure or abundant. Perhaps we don't get the appreciation, recognition, or success that we want. Even if we do achieve some of these things, we still may suffer from a vague sense that there must be something more, some deeper meaning. Some of us may actually connect with a deeper meaning and feel increasingly fulfilled and expanded by a growing spiritual awareness. Nevertheless, there are stubborn and sometimes puzzling old patterns and areas of life where we experience great pain and confusion. Thus, our first task in building the new world is to admit that our life education has not necessarily taught us a satisfying way to live. We must learn a way of life that is very different from the way we approached things before. This may not be easy for us, and it will take time, commitment, and courage. Therefore, it's very important to be compassionate with ourselves, to continually remind ourselves what a tremendous task we are undertaking will not be accomplished overnight. In fact, it is a lifelong process. Just as a baby learns to walk by falling down repeatedly, we must remember that we are babies in the new world. We will learn by making lots of mistakes, and often we may feel ignorant, frightened, or unsure of ourselves. But we would not get angry at a baby every time he fell down. If we did, he'd probably never learn to walk with full confidence and power. So we must try not to criticize ourselves if we are not able to live and express ourselves as fully as we wish. Immediately, we are now learning to live more fully in accordance with the laws of the universe. We are challenged to explore all aspects of our human experience and to develop all levels of our being, the spiritual, mental, and emotional, as well as the physical. As we do this work, we experience an increasing sense of wholeness, empowerment, elevance, and a feeling of being on purpose in our lives. So, although letting go of the old world may seem difficult at times, it is well worth the commitment and hard work it takes to gradually make this transition into the new world. Meditation. Sit or lie down, relax. Close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. As you exhale, imagine that you are letting go of everything that you don't want or need. Easily, without effort, let any frustrations, tiredness, or worries melt away. This is a time to release an old way of life that no longer works for you. Imagine that your old ways, your old patterns, and all the obstacles to achieving what you truly want are gently dissolved and leaving your body with each breath. Every time you exhale and release a little of your old limitations, you create more space inside of you for something new. After doing this for a few minutes, begin to imagine that every time you inhale, you are breathing in life energy, the life force of the universe. Within this life energy is everything you need and desire. The love, power, health, beauty, strength, abundance. Breathe it in. With each inhalation, imagine a new wave of life opening up, filling you with alveins, vitality, and energy. Pretend your life is exactly the way you want it to be. Imagine this new life is here, now, and savor it. When the meditation feels complete, gently open your eyes and come back into the room. Newness in yourself. Remember that you are now in the process of creating a new life for yourself. Chapter 2. The higher power within us. The foundation for life in the new world is built on the understanding that there is a higher intelligence, a fundamental creative power or energy in the universe that is the source and substance of all existence. The words and concepts that have been used to describe this power are innumerable. Here are just a few. God, goddess, higher power, source, spirit, essence, being, soul, inner guidance, higher self, the universe, life force, the Tao, living in the light, the force, cosmic intelligence, Buddha nature, the light, Christ consciousness, great spirit, I am, all that is. These terms are attempts to express an experience or moments that is difficult to convey in words and rational concepts. Each of us has this experience within us of the words we choose to describe it or merely the labels that suit us best. I seldom use the word God as it has so many confusing connotations for so many. Frequently, people associated with early religious training, which is no longer meaningful to them, may think of God as someone or something outside of themselves, or the old man in the sky with the long white beard. I prefer terms such as higher power, the universe, spirit, or inner guidance. In this book, I will use some of these terms interchangeably to refer to our spiritual source, the essential creative intelligence and power within us. If any of these terms are not particularly meaningful to you, please feel free to substitute whatever word you prefer. For the first 20 years of my life, my connection to the spiritual aspect of my being was largely undeveloped. I had no conscious experience of or belief in a higher power of any sort. I have had to move through many levels of doubt, skepticism, disbelief, and fear in order to arrive at the great trust I now have in the higher power of the universe that is within me and within everyone and everything that exists. I have not accepted anything on blind faith, so in a sense I have had to prove everything to myself through my life experiences. As I've learned to place my trust in the higher power of the universe and to live in accordance with universal principles, the changes I have felt and seen in my life are truly miraculous. Those of you who have felt deep spiritual awareness throughout your lives already have a solid foundation to build upon. Those of you who have felt spiritually disconnected as I have, hope my words will support and encourage you to find this inner connection for yourself. There is no specific way to do this. Everyone's experience is different. If this is something that you desire, ask within yourself that you be guided into an experience of your own spiritual nature. This may take some time, but if you desire it, it will happen. The words and exercises in this book may help you with this. The universe has both personal and impersonal aspects. As I surrender and trust more, I find my relationship with this higher power becoming more personal. I can sometimes sense a presence within me, guiding me, loving me, teaching me, encouraging me. This personal aspect, the universe can be teacher, guide, friend, mother, father, lover, creative genius, or fairy godmother. In other words, many of my needs and desires can be fulfilled through this interconnection. I often find the most powerful communion with the universe when I am alone, especially out in nature. At such times, the places inside of me that sometimes feel empty are filled with the energy of spirit. Here I find a guiding presence that nudges me in the direction I need to go and helps me to learn the lesson that lies in taking each step along my path. Meditation. Sit or lie down in a comfortable position. Close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. Each time you exhale, relax your body more and more. Then take a few more deep breaths, and each time you exhale, relax your mind. Let your thoughts drift by without holding on to any of them. Allow your mind to go out of focus. Relax your awareness into a deep place within you. Imagine that there is a very powerful presence within you. Presence is totally loving, strong, and wise. It is nurturing, protecting, guiding, and caring for you. At times it can be very strong and forceful. It can also be very light, joyful, and playful. As you get to know and trust it, it will make your life exciting, meaningful, and fulfilling. You may get an image or a feeling or a physical sensation that represents this higher presence. Even if you don't see or feel a thing, assume it is there regardless. Relax and enjoy the feeling or thought that you are being totally taken care of. The universe. Say this affirmation to yourself, silently or loud. I feel and trust the presence of the universe in my life. Chapter THRE. Intuition. Once we acknowledge the higher power of the universe, the obvious question arises of how can we contact this power and gain access to it. After all, if there is within us a superior wisdom or a deeper knowledge than we normally experience, by tapping into it, we should be able to receive valuable guidance in how to live well in this confusing world. This realization began to dawn on me many years ago as I undertook my journey of consciousness. I have since discovered that the knowingness that resides in each of us can be accessed through what we usually call our intuition. By learning to contact, listen to, and act on our intuition, we can directly connect to this inner wisdom and allow it to become our guiding force. This is where we find ourselves in opposition to life, as most of us have been taught to live it in the old world. In modern Western civilization, we have learned to respect and even worship the rational, logical aspect of our being and to dismiss, depreciate, or deny our intuition. We do acknowledge the ability of animals to seemingly understand things that are way beyond their rational capacity. We call this instinct, but it's a mystery that defies logical explanation. So we shrug our shoulders and dismiss it as something vastly inferior to the magnificent human ability to reason. Our culture's entire value system is firmly based on the belief that the rational principle is superior and, in fact, constitutes the highest truth. The Western scientific tradition has become our religion. We are taught from a young age to try to be reasonable, logical, and consistent, to avoid emotional, irrational behavior, and to suppress our feelings. At best, feelings and emotions are considered foolish, weak, and bothersome. At worst, we fear they may threaten the very fabric of civilized society. Our established religious institutions often support this fear of the intuitive, non-rational self, once based on a deep awareness of the universal spiritual principle in every being. Many religions only pay lip service to that idea now. Instead, they seek to control the behavior of their devotees, using elaborate rule structures purported to save people from their deep, irrational, and basically sinful natures. And according to many psychological disciplines, the dark and dangerous instinctual nature of man must be controlled. From this perspective, it is only the rational part of us that is capable of harnessing this mysterious force and channeling it into healthy, constructive modes. In our worship of the rational and fear of the non-rational, deny not only our emotions and our instinctual energies such as sexuality and aggression, but also our natural intuitive sense, which is meant to be a primary guiding force in our lives. Generally, this technically developed societies approach life with a deep awareness of and respect for the intuitive element of existence. Every moment of their daily lives is guided by a strong sense of connection with the creative force. However, it is their very lack of technical development that has contributed to their gradual destruction or subversion by modern civilization. Examples relevant to most Americans are the Native American and African cultures. Both of these groups were devastated by their contact with European American culture. However, a deep curiosity, respect, and appreciation for Native Americans has begun to surface in our awareness in recent years. And the African culture, forcibly brought to this continent, has probably done more than any other culture to keep the intuitive power alive in our country. Through its strong and soulful connection to spirit in human evolution, it seems that as a rational capacity has evolved, we've grown increasingly fearful of the other aspects of our natures. We attempted to control these dark forces by creating authoritative rule structures that define right and wrong, good and bad, and appropriate and inappropriate behavior in a very heavy-handed way. We justify this rigid approach to life by blaming everything on non-rational nature from our personal, emotional dramas to social ills such as drug and alcohol addiction, crime, violence, and war. The truth is that all aspects of our being are integral, important, and valuable parts of us. The more we distrust and suppress these energies, the more likely they are to eventually burst out in distorted ways. In other words, our problems are not necessarily caused by our emotional, non-rational nature running wild and uncontrolled. Instead, both personal and social problems are more likely to be the result of fear and the suppression of our emotions, instinctual nature, and intuition. In this book, we are focusing on how we can reclaim the power of our intuitive sense. Once we accept the reality of a higher power that is channeled to us through our intuition, it becomes clear that many of our personal problems and the ills of the world are actually caused by not following our intuition. Our rational mind is like a computer that processes the input it receives and calculates logical conclusions based on this information. The rational mind is finite, it can only compute the input it has received directly. In other words, our rational minds can only operate on the basis of the direct experience each of us has had in this lifetime. The intuitive mind, on the other hand, seems to have access to an infinite supply of information. It appears to be able to tap into a deep storehouse of knowledge and wisdom of the universal mind. It is also able to sort out this information and supply us with exactly what we need when we need it. Though the message may come through a bit at a time, if we learn to follow this supply of information piece by piece, the necessary course of action will be revealed. As we learn to rely on this guidance, life takes on a flowing, effortless quality. Our life, feelings, and actions interweave harmoniously with those of others around us. It is as if each of us played a unique instrument in a huge symphony orchestra conducted by a universal intelligence. If we play our part without regard for the conductor's direction or the rest of the orchestra, we will have total chaos. If we try to take our cues from those around us, rather than the conductor, it will be impossible to achieve harmony. There are too many people, all playing different things. Our intellect is not able to process so much input and decide on the best note to play at each moment. However, if we watch the conductor and follow his direction, we can experience the joy of playing our unique part, which can be heard and appreciated by everyone, and at the same time experience ourselves as part of a greater harmonious whole. When we apply this analogy to our lives, we see that most of us have never realized a conductor was present. We have lived the best we can, using only our intellect to understand our lives, to figure out the best course of action. If we are honest with ourselves, we will readily admit that we are not making great music under the guidance of our rational mind alone. The dissonance and chaos in our lives and in the world certainly reflects the impossibility of living this way. By tuning into the intuition and allowing it to become the guiding force in our lives, we allow our inner conductor to take its rightful place as the leader of the orchestra. Rather than losing our individual freedom, we receive the support we need to effectively express our individuality. Moreover, we will enjoy the experience of being part of a larger creative process. I don't fully understand how the intuition functions in such an amazing way, but I definitely know, through direct experience and through observation and feedback from the many people I have worked with, that it does. And I find that the more I trust and follow this inner intuitive voice, the easier, fuller, and more exciting my life becomes. Meditation. Sit or lie down in a comfortable position in a quiet place. Close your eyes and relax. Take several slow, deep breaths, relaxing your body more with each breath. Relax your mind and let your thoughts drift, but don't hold onto any thought. Imagine that your mind becomes as quiet as a peaceful lake. Now focus your conscious awareness into a deep place in your body, in the area of your stomach or solar plexus. It should be the place in your body where you feel that your gut feelings reside. This is the physical place where you can easily contact your intuition. Imagine that you have a wise being living inside there. You might have an image of what this wise being looks like, or you might just sense that it is there. This wise being is really a part of you or your intuitive self. You can communicate with it by silently talking to it, making requests, or asking questions. Then relax. Don't think too hard with your rational mind, and be open to receiving the answers. The answers are usually very simple, relate to the present moment, or not the past or future, and they feel right. If you don't receive an immediate answer, let go and go about your life. The answer will come later, whether from inside of you, in the form of a feeling or idea, or from outside through a person, a book, an event, or whatever. For example, you might say, "Intuition, tell me what I need to know here. What do I need to do in this situation?" Trust the feeling that you get and act on it. If it is truly your intuition, you will find that it leads to a feeling of greater relevance and power, and more opportunities begin to open up for you. Doesn't lead to these things, you may not have been truly acting from your intuition, but from some other voice in you. Go back and ask for clarification. It takes practice to hear and trust your intuition. The more you do it, the easier it will become. Eventually, you will be able to contact your intuition, ask yourself questions, and know that in that wise being within you, an incredible source of power and strength is available to answer your questions and guide you as you grow. More sensitive to this guidance, you will gain a sense of knowing what you need to do in any situation. Your intuitive power is always available to guide you whenever you need it. It will open to you as you become willing to trust yourself and your inner Nola. Chapter 4. Becoming a creative channel. Whatever degree you listen to and follow your intuition, become a creative channel for the higher power of the universe. When you willingly follow where your creative energy leads, the higher power can come through you to manifest its creative work. When this happens, you will find yourself flowing with the energy, doing what you really want to do, and feeling the power of the universe moving through you to create or transform everything around you. In using the word channel, I am not referring to the psychic process of trans-channeling. Trans-channeling involves a medium who goes into a trance state and allows another being to speak through him or her. By channeling, I mean being in touch with and bringing through the wisdom and creativity of your own deepest source. Being a channel is being fully and freely yourself and consciously knowing that you are a vehicle for the creativity of the universe. Every creative genius has been a channel. Every masterwork has been created through the channeling process. Great works are not created by the personality alone. They arise from a deep inspiration on the universal level and are then expressed and brought into form through the individual personality. A person may have great technical skill, but without the ability to connect with a deeper source, his work will be uninspiring. The difference between a technician and a channel was clearly demonstrated in the movie Amadeus. The composer Salieri knew how to write music, but he didn't know how to tap into the creative source. Mozart wrote music that was both technically perfect and wonderfully inspired, and he did so easily, spontaneously, without thought or effort. From his early childhood on, music just seemed to bubble up and overflow from within him. I'm sure he had no idea how it happened and could not have explained to anyone else how to do it. Such genius has always seemed mysterious and unexplainable. God-given talent possessed by only a few. It seems to come and go at will. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Because of this, many creative people fear their talent will suddenly disappear. They don't know how they got it, so they have no idea how to recover it if it vanishes. Creative people often function as channels in only one area of their lives, such as one of the arts, science, or business, and may have no idea how to do it in other areas of their lives. Thus, their lives can be terribly out of balance. See the section on highly intuitive people in the chapter on trusting intuition. This is one reason why we often equate genius with emotional instability. I believe we are all geniuses, each in our own unique way. We'll discover the nature of our particular genius when we stop trying to conform to our own or other people's models, learn to be ourselves, and allow our natural channel to open. Through trusting and acting on our intuition, it's possible to bring our natural creative inspiration into every moment and every area of our lives. When I speak of a channel, I have an image of a long round pipe with energy flowing through it. It's somewhat like the pipe in a pipe organ with the music coming through. This channel image has three important features. 1. It is open and unobstructed inside so that the energy can move through freely. 2. It has a definite physical form. A structure surrounds the open space so that the energy is directed in a particular way. Without this structure, the energy would be free floating without any focus. 3. It has a power source, is something that moves energy through the channel. In a pipe organ, the power source of the organ sends energy through the open pipes. The particular combination of open space inside each pipe and the structure of the size and shape of the pipe causes a certain note to be sounded. The power source is the same for all the pipes, and the energy moving through them is the same, but because each one is a different shape, each one makes a unique sound. We can think of ourselves as channels similar to these pipes. We have a common power source of the universal life force, and the same creative energy flows through each of us. Our body and personality form the structure that determines the unique direction and function of each of us as a channel. It is up to us to keep our channel open and clear and to build and maintain a strong, healthy, beautiful body personality structure as a vehicle for our creative energy. We can do this by constantly tuning in, asking where the energy wants to go, and moving with it. A strong body personality structure is not created by following anybody else's rules or good ideas about what you should eat, how you should exercise, or anything else. It is created primarily by trusting your intuition and learning to follow its direction. Deciding what to eat, how to exercise, or anything else, gather information from reliable sources. Then check in with yourself to see what feels intuitively right for you and do your best to follow your own inner guidance. Most of us have had occasional experiences of trusting our intuition and having things work out in amazing ways. The following true story is a good example of this. A few years ago, my editor, Becky, had achieved what many people think of as the American dream. She had a husband and daughter, a good job, money in the bank, and owned her own home. Yet she felt an emptiness inside. She felt an inner prompting to leave her job and pursue a career in publishing. Her husband did not support this idea. In fact, he pointed out that she didn't have the formal education necessary to obtain a position in a publishing house. Becky and her husband eventually separated, and she decided to make a move. She had been reading many books, including Living in the Light, and knew that she wanted to work for a publisher in the field of personal growth. Her intuitive feeling was that she needed to move to Northern California. It was the most difficult and courageous step she had ever taken. She found herself in a new community with no friends, no job, and no money. She had no luck at first obtaining a publishing job, and so she looked for any kind of work that would enable her to survive. Many times she questioned her choice to take such a risk. Yet, she kept feeling a deep sense that she was on the right track. Finally, she found work in another field. She was able to get back on her feet financially, and she regained her confidence, continued her search for a publishing job, and this time she was successful. She happily took a cut in pay and position to take an entry-level job at New World Library, the company she had always hoped to work for. Finally, she felt she was at home. This writing, Vicky has been with New World Library for 6 years. She has her dream job as the editorial director. By following her inner guidance, even through very difficult times, she found the perfect place to express her creativity and make her contribution to the world. You may have had a similar experience where listening to your intuition about something proved so fruitful and fulfilling. So, the next step is to become more conscious of the process so you can recognize when you are following the flow of energy as opposed to blocking, fighting, or trying to control it. The more willing you are to surrender to the energy within you, the more power can flow through you. I know most of us have had experiences at certain times when we felt life energy, wisdom, and power flow through us. When we have felt momentarily enlightened, we have a brief moment of clarity and power, and then it goes away again. When it goes away, we feel lost and unsure of ourselves. The more you practice trusting and following your intuition, the more consistently you will feel that sense of flow. At these times, you may find yourself right where you want to be at every moment. You will be where the energy is the greatest for you, doing what you want to do and watching miracles being accomplished. Your energy may have a transformational effect on others as well. As you strengthen the commitment to trusting yourself, everything in your life may change. At first, as you begin to let go of your old patterns, it may appear that things in your life are falling apart. You may find that you have to let go of certain things you've been attached to. Some relationships in your life may dissolve or simply fizzle out from lack of energy. Old pastimes may no longer interest you. You may even lose your job or decide to leave it. Of course, these changes can be upsetting and frightening. Over time, however, you will find that this is all part of the transformation you are going through. As you learn to be true to yourself, you will find that you attract people, work, and other circumstances that reflect your evolution and development. Maintaining your focus. In order to live fully and creatively, it's important to stay focused on following your own energy. This focus allows your channel to remain open to the energy flowing through. It's so easy to lose your focus, to get lost in other people, external goals, and desires. And the problem is, we do exactly that, we lose our connection with ourselves. As long as we are overly focused on that side, there will always be an empty, hungry, lost place inside that needs to be filled. If I'm in love with someone and begin to think of him as my source of joy, then I lose myself. I have to remind myself that the source of joy and love is already within me, that I am experiencing love externally only because it is inside me. I try to keep the focus on the universe within and at the same time feel the universe calming through my lover to me. For me, it's a constant discipline to remember to go back inside to connect with my intuition. I'll remind myself regularly during the day to do this. If I find myself getting lost in my outer activities, I'll check back inside to see if I am being true to my feelings. This keeps the flow of the universe moving through me.